Today we are settling a call out and going drag racing. We've got a little bit of Silverado on Silverado action, turbo 4.8 extended cab versus supercharged 4.8 single cab. We got two fairly quick trucks, but unfortunately at the end of the day today, we have one of those trucks that suffered some fairly significant damage, which basically resulted in a completely blown engine. About a month ago, we did get a call out from John with the YouTube channel Budget Build Inc. And we decided we're gonna go drag racing to figure out just some differences between these two trucks. But the unfortunate thing is I live here in the state of Utah on the West Coast and John lives in the South in Louisiana. And there's about 1,500 miles in between each of our houses. So not very practical to meet up and do a race in person. But thankfully, John and I each happen to have a Draggy GPS box. You can see mine mounted right there on the windshield of the truck. It's a GPS-based accelerometer, and they're actually very accurate when it comes to comparing acceleration of different vehicles. You can use them anywhere on the planet. So we figured, why not just do some draggy runs rather than driving like, 2 or 3 days each to meet up in the middle and, I don't know, bugs in here. Whole nother thing. So we're going drag racing, but first, let's take a look at each contender. John's truck is a 2008 Chevy Silverado. It's a half-ton extended cab, two-wheel drive, and under the hood it has a 4.8 just like mine, although his is a Gen 4, which means it's a little bit stronger. He does have a few internal upgrades just like we did. He's got a performance camshaft, different valve springs and lifters, and to back up the Turbo 4.8, he has a Turbo 400 transmission, which is very strong. He's running a 78-75 turbo on about 16 pounds of boost, and he's also running water meth injection to help keep the IATs nice and cool. My truck is a 2000 Chevy Silverado. It's a single cab, short box, step side, and all in it weighs about 4,800 pounds with me in the driver's seat. Underneath the hood is still the original LR4 4.8 liter LS that came in the truck, but it has had a few modifications since then. Mainly, we opened up the ring gaps, we put in a performance camshaft, we put some better valve springs in, just cleaned everything up, and then of course we have the LSA supercharger from Boost District, which provides about 15 pounds of boost into this 4.8. It's got long tube headers, dual 3-inch exhaust that goes into a single 4-inch tailpipe with dual mufflers to kind of keep the noise under control. It makes 530 horsepower at the wheels on a chassis dyno with 550 pound-feet of torque. And then the main thing that sets this truck apart from a lot of others on the road is the all-wheel drive system. I gathered some parts from a 2001 GMC Yukon Denali, so it has an NV149 viscous coupled full-time all-wheel drive transfer case, and of course the matching front differential. And in those differentials, both front and rear, we have a 430 gear, which really helps this truck jump off the line in a hurry. Now, before we get to the racing, there is one part that I need to install, and it's not necessarily going to add more horsepower or help this truck go any faster, but it is going to help the truck survive a little bit longer because there is one part that I feel like we're kind of pushing the limits on, and if that part does fail, well, it could leave us with a fair amount of engine damage. So we don't want that to happen, so we'll get that installed, taken care of in just a second. But first, place your bets down below in the comments. Let me know which truck do you guys think is going to win. Are you on Team John or are you on Team COPO? I feel like that John's truck is actually going to win in the quarter mile. He's making a little bit more horsepower than we are. He's running a little bit more boost. Of course, he's turbocharged. So with all those factors kind of coming into play, I feel like at the 1320, his truck it'll probably get there first, but even if it doesn't get to the quarter mile first, it'll definitely be going at a faster mile an hour than the COPO truck. That's my guess. But in the 8th mile, the 330, the 60 foot, and the 0 to 60 mile an hour, well, I feel like the COPO truck is gonna win that hands down, simply because of all those things that we constantly talk about. The supercharged instant torque, there's no lag. We have the all-wheel drive system, which provides great traction, and of course the gearing, which is just a perfect package for making this truck accelerate, or at least in the short distance. Because we are a little bit down on horsepower, he probably still will have a better mile an hour, but we can always add more horsepower later. So anyway, that's my prediction. Curious to see what you guys think, but first, let's get that install taken care of.
So as you can probably tell, we're installing a fuel pressure gauge. It has one on here, but obviously you can't see that while you're driving the truck. So I just want to keep an eye on it because we're running full 85% ethanol right now. And I have a single 450 pump in the tank. And I'm just a little bit nervous about how much capacity that pump has. So I'm installing the AEM gauge. Basically, I'll plug it right in here. We've got the new sending unit actually. And so that will show me fuel pressure inside the cab. But the cool thing about this gauge is it'll actually output a 0 to 5 volt signal. I can actually data log with the HP Tuner software I use. So it'll be on the gauge so I can just glance at it, and it'll be in the data logger if I choose to set it up that way, which I probably will. It works. Cool. Now what? So as we go out to the spot here, I was thinking about the install of the gauge. I'm not sure I entirely explained why I'm putting a fuel pressure gauge in. Basically, we got a single 450 liter per hour pump in the tank. We're running 85% ethanol, which does require a lot more volume of fuel than just pump gas at the power level that we're at, or any power level, I guess. So I'm just concerned that the pump is not big enough, but by watching the gauge as we accelerate, if I notice a drop in fuel pressure, then I'll know the pump is not adequate. Or if I notice the fuel pressure stays rock steady, I know that the pump is doing what it should. So it's just one more safety measure to keep an eye on things. We do have a bit of a drive to get out to the drag strip in Mexico, of course. So I did want to get a couple of launches just to kind of show you guys how this thing looks taken off while it's still daylight. And then in a little bit, we'll get the actual runs.
So real quick detour before we get to the actual call out. After I filmed the 2 launch videos that you guys just saw, I came back to the shop here and I wanted to make a couple of adjustments to the shock valving because I felt like it wasn't doing exactly what I thought it should be. So I just kind of wanted to optimize the 60 foot. I've been messaging back and forth with Brent Timms for some time now. He has probably one of the coolest naturally aspirated all-wheel drive Silverado SS's that I have seen. That truck will actually do a quicker quarter mile and of course eighth mile than both my COPO truck and my ugly truck, and those both have forced induction, and he's still working with an NA 6 liter. He's got the suspension dialed in where his truck will launch nice and smooth and flat, and it doesn't really have much drum at all. And if you'll notice on my videos, especially the second one, the front end rises up pretty quickly, then kind of falls back down. And then on the passenger side rear tire, it kind of comes unloaded just for a second. Like you can see where the black mark is pretty dark, and then it lightens up, and then it gets darker again. So anyway, I haven't really messed with any shock adjustments since I put this thing together, and even since LS Fest. So I kind of figured Brent's the guy to go to. He gave me a few suggestions and pointers on where to set the valving on these things. So I made some adjustments, and unfortunately, because it's now dark outside, I won't be able to actually get another exterior shot to see how the truck reacts. I'll try my best to kind of feel what it's doing, but I'll go out at some other point in the future and get a bunch of launch videos and kind of play with the shock settings further. But I feel like just by tightening things up the way we did, it'll be a lot better. But anyway, back to the call out. The first thing that I'll show you, John already sent me his 2 videos that he ran for his draggy runs. So Let's see how fast this truck is.
5, 6.
So I gotta say, I am very impressed with the mile an hour that John's truck does in the back half of the track. I do think though that he does struggle in the short track. And talking with John over the last couple of weeks, you know, that's one of the biggest challenges that he faces with his two-wheel drive truck, and I think he's still on a street tire, is just hooking up and putting the power down to the ground. That turbo lights pretty dang quick when it gets into boost, but it just spins the tires, and that's of course a challenge when it comes to being quick down the drag strip. So his numbers, we have a 225 60 foot, 853 at 91 mile an hour in the 8th, and then a 1279 at 116 in the quarter. So we've got our work cut out for us if we want to beat the truck. I think we can probably do it in the 8th. The quarter, I'm not entirely sure yet, but before we get to my final draggy run, I was kind of doing some editing a little bit ago, and I found the original draggy quarter-mile run that I did with this truck when I first bought it. So bone stock 4.8, you know, 373 gears, stock manifolds, cats, like 100% bone stock truck. So I'm going to throw that in now just kind of for entertainment reasons, because it's kind of hilarious how slow this truck used to be. Now, one thing that I think is particularly interesting is the mile an hour here, because when the truck was bone stock at the end of the quarter, it was doing something like 80 miles an hour, where now we probably ought to be able to do that in the 8th, or at least, you know, probably a little bit quicker, to be honest. So without any further ado, here is the final draggy run: turbo 4.8 versus LSA supercharged 4.8, two-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, Silverado versus Silverado. Which truck is quicker in the quarter mile? So at this point, I only wanted to do one run and just kind of be done with it. And I thought, okay, we've got this in the bag. With the current runs that you've seen so far, the COPO truck was about a half a second quicker roughly in both the 8th and the quarter mile. So I thought, all right, this is great. But due to a miscommunication, I realized those were actually John's baseline videos that he sent over. They weren't his final runs. He had a couple of modifications that he did. So the very next run that you're going to see is one of John's runs. He actually, I think he changed some things around in the rear suspension, added some different shocks, put a locker in, and traction bar. So he then went out and did one more run with those modifications. So check it out. So you can probably tell he was pedaling the truck quite a bit in his first two runs that you saw a little while ago. But the one that you just saw with the different traction bars and the locker and stuff like that, the truck definitely hooks up and it gets off the line much quicker. The COPO truck, kind of like we predicted, was still quicker in the 8th, our 786 to his, let's see, 823 in the 8th mile. But at the quarter, he got there first. He's got a 1219 at 116 miles an hour, but he wasn't done yet. help of a pair of drag radials on the back, aired down to about 20 PSI, John's Turbo 4.8 Silverado was able to click off an amazing quarter-mile run of 11.99 at 117 miles an hour. So that's like 0.31 seconds quicker than us at the quarter mile, which is awesome. And his mile an hour was crazy. Like he was going, let's see, 117 miles an hour to my 111. So 6 miles an hour faster, very impressive. Well done, John. But that being said, at the 8th mile, just like we predicted, the COPO truck still got there first. Our 786 at 88 to his 819 at 93. So we had a faster mile an hour at the 8th, but we got there first. Although, John wasn't done yet.
Something broke, guys. Damn. That's it. That's it, guys. Something broke. I'm just coasting. Haven't even messed with the tune or anything. It had been running fine before. Not sure, guys. It was making some power too. It was making some steam, man. It was pulling. Won't even start. Hard click. So that's something in the motor that don't want to turn.
So that's pretty much like the last thing that you want to have happen to anybody in any sort of a motorsport type of engine. Engine failure is a major bummer. I know how hard people work on these trucks. John's got a countless number of hours in putting this Silverado together, and he built something that was able to beat the COPO truck, which is not necessarily like, I mean, this truck isn't the fastest thing in the world, but we're working with 4.8 liter engines. We're moving heavy trucks, and his truck did an 11.99 at 117, and his last pass, it might have been even faster. I don't know what damage has been done to the inside of the engine just yet, although you can pretty well tell that if the engine won't even turn over, it's probably not something good. I'll try to keep you guys updated when John tears the engine down, just to give you like a damage report. Because I'm kind of curious as to what failed and how it failed. I did ask him to send over a data log just because I'm kind of curious as to, you know, things like boost pressure and timing and mixture and things like that. So that's kind of the conclusion, guys. John's truck won 11.99 to my 12.30. In the 8th mile, though, the COPO truck did still get to the 8th mile marker first, although at a slightly slower mile an hour. In my opinion, two very cool built trucks. But do me a favor, guys, go support John's channel. Head on over there, Budget Build Inc. I'll have the description or the link down in the description below. It's like major bummer. Go show him support, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you again in another couple of days.